I used to think Evan would never cross the line between cold and cruel. Turns out, he was capable of both in the same breath. It was our anniversary night. I had dinner-ready steak, roasted potatoes, his favorite bourbon. The kind of quiet night we used to have before everything turned into a negotiation. I lit candles, turned on some music, and even put on the dress he once said made me look like someone worth coming home to. He was late, of course. He was always late now. I'd stopped calling to ask where he was, because the answer was always the same. Work ran late. When the doorbell finally rang, I smiled out of habit. But that smile froze somewhere halfway. Evan walked in, all smiles, all charm, and behind him there she was, Lydia Moore, his assistant. The one I'd seen at corporate dinners. The one who always laughed too hard at his jokes. Tonight, she wasn't wearing her work clothes. She was glowing, and very, very pregnant. Evan didn't even look embarrassed. He had that smug, "this is necessary," look like this moment had been rehearsed. My eyes went to his hand, resting lightly on Lydia's back. My stomach dropped. He cleared his throat. "Harper, this is Lydia. I wanted you to hear this from me directly." My voice barely came out. "Hear what, Evan?" Then came the line that burned itself into my memory. "Lydia's pregnant, and I need you to understand, this isn't a mistake. This is what I've always wanted." All pine. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Even the clock on the wall felt too loud. His mother, Ellen, appeared from the kitchen like she'd been waiting for her cue. She looked at Lydia, then at me. "Finally, someone's giving this family what it deserves," she said, smiling like Christmas came early. I remember the air leaving my body. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, watching my 10-year marriage collapse between the table settings. Evan kept talking, as if I were a client and he was delivering bad news on paper. "Harper, we've both known the truth for a while. You can't have children. You've seen the doctors. It's time we stop pretending." There it was. My humiliation, carefully packaged and delivered in front of his mother and his pregnant lover. He called me barren in every possible way except by name. Lydia kept her eyes down. For a second, I almost pitied her. She didn't look proud. She looked terrified. But Evan stood tall, pretending this was noble, that I should somehow applaud his honesty. I said quietly, "You could have told me privately." He smiled cold, polished. "You deserve to know the truth." The truth. That word hit different when it came from a liar. I looked around at the table, food untouched. Candles flickering like they were embarrassed too. My hands didn't shake. They felt distant, like they didn't belong to me. I set my napkin down, pushed my chair back, and said the only thing that made sense. "I understand now." Ellen frowned. "Understand what?" "That I've been in the wrong room for years." I grabbed my purse, my keys, and walked out. No yelling, no scene. Just footsteps against marble. Evan called after me, "Don't be dramatic, Harper. We can make this easy." I didn't look back. I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Outside, the night was cold and still. I could see my breath in the air, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something that wasn't shame. It was quiet, anger steady, clean, like a cut made with precision. Halfway to my car, I laughed. Not the kind of laugh that comes from humor, the kind that comes when you realize everything you believed just turned out to be a script someone else wrote for you. When I sat behind the wheel, I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My mascara had smudged, but I didn't care. I whispered, "So, that's how it ends?" But deep down, I knew it wasn't the end. Evan thought he'd finished me that night. He thought he'd written my ending. He had no idea that I just started rewriting his. Before I started the car, I pulled out my phone. One new message from him. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." He smiled. "Oh, I won't." Then I drove away from that house, and everything inside it. If this part hits you in the gut, tell me what you'd have done in her place. Drop a comment, I read every single one. And if you like real cheating stories and revenge stories where the truth wins quietly, hit subscribe. It keeps the stories coming. The morning light crept in through the blinds, and for the first time in 10 years, I woke up somewhere that didn't smell like his cologne. The air felt too clean. I'd barely slept, but I didn't feel tired, just emptied out like someone had scraped everything inside me and left a shell that could finally breathe. The apartment was small, 2 rooms and a view of a parking lot, but it was mine. I dropped the last box on the floor and looked around. No photos, no furniture yet, just walls that didn't remember me crying. That alone felt like progress. My phone buzzed. It was Evan again. Please sign the divorce papers. No good morning, no apology, no hint of humanity, just paperwork. I left the message on read. I spent the day unpacking what little I took: my clothes, my laptop, a few dishes, and the coffee mug that said, "Keep going." Fitting, right? Around noon, I walked to a nearby cafe for breakfast. The girl behind the counter smiled and asked if I wanted my coffee to stay or to go. For some reason, that question hit harder than I expected. I hadn't been given a choice in anything for years. To stay, I said. While waiting, I saw a flyer on the counter. Support group for women experiencing infertility and loss. Every Thursday, 6 p.m. I took one. Not because I planned to go, but because something about it stung in the right way. When Thursday came, I went. The meeting was in a small community center room that smelled like coffee and disinfectant. A circle of chairs, a few women of different ages, quiet laughter that didn't sound forced. The leader, a woman named Janine, welcomed me like she'd known me for years. Everyone took turns sharing their stories, failed treatments, miscarriages, the way people said, "You can always adopt," like it was an aspirin for heartbreak. When it came to me, I didn't know what to say. I just said, "My husband left because I couldn't give him a child." A woman across from me nodded. Mine said the same thing. Another whispered, "You're not the problem. The problem is men who think we're factories." That line stuck with me. By the time the session ended, I wasn't healed, but I wasn't alone either. I walked out into the cool Denver night, and for the first time, the silence didn't feel like punishment. The next morning, I made coffee, sat at my small kitchen table, and opened my laptop. Bills, emails, work messages, life moving on, like nothing happened. But in one of the emails from Evan's office, I noticed something odd. A notice of ownership transfer, forwarded by accident. The subject line read, "Asset shift, More Holdings." More. Lydia's last name. It could have been a coincidence, but nothing about Evan ever was. I saved the email and sat back, staring at the screen. My pulse started to steady, not from fear, but clarity. I'd spent years being careful, gentle, quiet. Maybe it was time to stop. That night, I cleaned out the rest of my inbox, deleted old photos, blocked Evan's number, and threw away everything that smelled like our house. It wasn't anger, it was cleanup, like disinfecting a wound before it heals. A few days later, I visited my old office to pick up personal files. People whispered, avoided eye contact. News travels fast when scandal smells fresh. My boss, Mark, pulled me aside. "Harper, if you need a break, take it. You're one of the best analysts we've had." "Thanks," I said. "I'm just reorganizing a few things." He smiled politely, probably assuming that meant therapy. He wasn't wrong. That evening, I went back to the support group. Janine opened with something simple. "We can't control what people do to us, but we can decide what happens next." It wasn't dramatic. It was practical. The kind of wisdom you don't clap for you, just feel it settle in your bones. After the meeting, I sat in my car for a while, staring at the flyer on the dashboard. Support, recovery, truth. 3 words I'd never put together before. Then my phone buzzed again. A new message from Evan's number. This time, shorter. "You'll regret dragging this out." I laughed out loud. Dragging it out? He'd humiliated me, cheated on me, lied for years, and now I was the one being unreasonable, because I hadn't signed away my dignity fast enough. I deleted the message, but I didn't block him again. Not yet. Something in me wanted to see what he'd do next, not because I cared, but because I'd finally stopped caring. That night, I took out my notebook and started listing everything I knew about him, his habits, his weaknesses, his too smart to get caught routines. I wasn't plotting revenge, not exactly. I was just preparing. Because when a man like Evan says you're broken, what he really means is he's terrified you'll figure out you're not. Somewhere between those thoughts, I found a calm I didn't expect. It wasn't happiness. It was the kind of quiet that comes right before something changes. I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and looked out the window. The city was still awake, lights blinking across downtown. Somewhere out there, Evan was probably drinking his imported whiskey, convinced he'd already won. He had no idea that by walking out of that house, I'd stopped playing his game completely. And that's the thing about peace once you've tasted it, you never go back to pretending. The paper crinkled under my hands as I filled out the medical release form. The nurse gave me a polite smile, the kind people reserve for someone going through a quiet disaster. "Doctor, Ortiz will see you in a few minutes," she said. The waiting room looked exactly as it did the last time I'd been there. Magazines about family life, a poster of a smiling baby on the wall. That one hurt the most. I used to stare at that picture during every appointment, convincing myself it wasn't my fault. Evan never came with me. He always had meetings. Dr. Samantha Ortiz walked in, same calm energy as always, hair tied back, clipboard in hand. "Harper Lane," she said softly. "It's been a while." I nodded. "I just need to close my file, that's all." She studied me for a moment, then sat across from me. "Are you sure that's all you want, Harper?" "I'm sure." She hesitated, then flipped through the folder on her desk. "Before I finalize anything, there's something you should see. When you and Evan came in for testing a few years ago, you both signed joint consent forms. Legally, you have the right to view all results." I frowned. He told me his results were clear. Her tone didn't change, but her eyes did. They weren't. My stomach tightened. She turned the file around and pointed to a line on the report. "Evan Pierce. Abnormal motility. Genetic factor detected. Extremely low probability of conception." For a moment, the words blurred together. I stared at them until they made sense. He wasn't just lying, he'd been lying for years. Dr. Ortiz looked sympathetic, not pitying, which somehow made it worse. "You went through multiple treatments, painful ones. I always wondered why he never pursued further testing himself." I swallowed hard. "Because he already knew." She nodded gently. "It's not uncommon. Some men prefer to let their partners believe otherwise." I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Prefer. That's one way to put it." The doctor leaned back. "I'm sorry, Harper. I really am." I took the file, signed the closure form, and thanked her. I wasn't angry at her. She'd just opened a door I didn't know existed. Outside, the Denver air was dry and bright, like the world didn't care that something inside me had just shifted. I walked to my car, sat there for a long minute, then whispered, "He did this." Not as an accusation, just a fact I finally understood. For years, I'd let Evan control the narrative. He made me believe I was the broken one. Every doctor's visit, every awkward family dinner, every cold night in bed, it all built around his version of the truth. Now I had proof that the truth had never belonged to him. Back at my apartment, I spread the documents out on the table. My mind went quiet in that strange, focused way it always did when I worked through numbers. Every detail had weight, dates, signatures, test results, evidence. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about justice, the kind that doesn't need applause, just balance. That night, I called Daniel Ross. We hadn't talked in years, but he answered on the second ring. "Harper Lane." Now that's a name I didn't expect to see pop up. I smiled slightly. "Hi, Daniel. You still deal with corporate law?" "Unfortunately, yes. Want to make it interesting?" "I might." He laughed. "What do you need?" "I just need someone who understands contracts and doesn't ask too many questions." That's half my client list. What's going on?" "I'll explain over coffee," I said. The next morning, we met at a small cafe near the courthouse. Daniel looked older, sharper, and definitely more cautious. He listened as I explained not about Evan's affair, not about humiliation, just the part that mattered. The company, the assets, the potential misuse of funds. When I finished, he leaned back, eyebrows raised. "So, he's moving company money under a new name?" More holdings, I said, named after his assistant. Subtle. I showed him the forwarded email. He skimmed it, whistled quietly. If you can trace this, you can prove intent to conceal. That's fraud. I don't want scandal, I said. I want accuracy. Daniel looked at me like he was recalibrating the version of me he remembered. You're not after blood? No. Just the truth. He nodded. Then you're going to need patience. Paper trails take time. I have time, I said. He doesn't. Daniel smiled. I see you still play the long game. Always did, I replied. When I left the cafe, the sunlight hit the window just right, and I saw my reflection different. Not softer, not colder, just awake. I went home, organized my paperwork, and labeled every folder. For someone who'd just learned her life had been built on a lie, I felt remarkably calm. Maybe that's what clarity does, it replaces chaos with quiet purpose. By midnight, I had everything sorted. I poured a glass of wine, sat by the window, and read through Evan's medical report one more time. Each line felt like another brick removed from the wall he'd built around me. At the bottom of the page, next to the date, was his signature. Bold, confident, the same signature he'd used to seal every lie. I set the paper down and whispered, "You really thought I'd never see this, didn't you?" I wasn't angry anymore. Anger gives him too much power. What I felt was simpler, sharper, like standing in a room full of shattered glass and realizing you're the one holding the broom. And for the first time since that night, I smiled, not because it was over, but because it had finally begun. The next morning started with the sound of the coffee maker sputtering like it was mocking me. I sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through Evan's company website. His photo was still on the homepage. Perfect smile, confident stance, the kind of face people trusted with their money. It hit me that for years, I had trusted that same face with everything else. Daniel called right on time. "I looked through the documents you sent," he said. "He's definitely moving money. Not enough for federal charges yet, but enough to raise eyebrows." I leaned back in my chair. "Then let's raise them. You know that means digging into your own company's books," he said. "My company," I corrected. "He's just borrowing it." Daniel chuckled. "Still sharp as hell. I miss that." We met later that day in his office downtown, a minimalist space with a wall of law books that probably hadn't been opened since 2008. He had the kind of calm that made you feel like chaos was optional. He laid out the paperwork, tapping his pen against the folder. "Here's what we do. We file an internal review, nothing aggressive, just a routine financial audit. You still own 35%, so you have the right. And when the audit finds what we already know," he smiled, "then we let the numbers speak." I liked the sound of that. Revenge without shouting. Justice in Excel form. As he talked through the logistics, I realized how different this felt from the emotional tornado Evan expected me to be trapped in. I wasn't crying. I wasn't raging. I was thinking. For once, I wasn't reacting to him. I was acting for myself. Daniel handed me a list of things he needed. Account logs, meeting records, expense reports. "Start gathering what you can access. Quietly," he said. "Quiet is my specialty," I replied. That evening, I logged into the company's shared drive. My access was still active. Typical Evan, he'd assumed I was too broken to use it. Within minutes, I found a string of transactions marked consulting fees under more holdings. The amounts weren't massive, but consistent, like a drip feeding a hidden account. I downloaded everything. My hands didn't shake once. As I worked, I caught myself smirking. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about accuracy. Evan had built his world on lies, and I was finally rewriting the math. A week later, Daniel and I met again. He scanned the files, whistled low. "He's sloppy. You'd think a man that arrogant would at least hire a better accountant." I shrugged. "He hired a girlfriend instead." Daniel grinned. "You know, Harper, if you ever get tired of finance, you'd make a damn good investigator." "I already am," I said. "Just didn't realize who I was investigating." We worked through the evening, cross-referencing bank statements and emails. Every transaction was a breadcrumb, and every breadcrumb led to Lydia Moore. She wasn't just his mistress, she was a legal liability. At one point, Daniel looked up and asked, Do you want to go public with this? Media, maybe? It would destroy him faster. I shook my head. No noise. No headlines. I don't need people to know he lied. I just need him to know I know. He nodded slowly. That's colder than most divorces I've seen. It's not cold, I said. It's clean. For the first time, Daniel didn't try to joke. He just looked at me with that quiet respect men usually reserve for someone who's already won. By the next week, the request for a formal audit had been filed. Evan's assistant emailed back with a predictable reply. Mr. Pierce is currently unavailable, but will review upon his return. Of course he was unavailable. Probably busy pretending to be the perfect husband with Lydia in public while wiring company funds to her private account in private. Still, I didn't react. I forwarded the email to Daniel, labeled it "Expected Delay," and got back to work. That Saturday, while everyone else was enjoying brunch, I was sitting in the park with a notebook, drafting what I called the rebuild plan. It wasn't revenge notes, just structure. The same way I used to build budgets. Columns for steps, rows for consequences. 1. Confirm audit schedule. 2. Verify Lydia's company registration. 3. Identify secondary accounts linked to more holdings. 4. Wait. It was the wait that mattered most. Evan's ego was predictable. Patience would ruin him faster than anger ever could. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You can still fix this, Harper. Stop before you regret it. I laughed quietly to myself. That tone, half command, half fear, was classic Evan. He'd always believed control was love. I typed back one line. I already stopped regretting. Then I put my phone face down and went back to my notes. That evening, I took a walk downtown. The air smelled like rain and new asphalt. Couples passed by holding hands, a group of teenagers laughed near the corner cafe, and for a fleeting second, I realized something. I didn't miss him, not the house, not the routine, not even the marriage. I missed who I thought I was supposed to be, but she was gone, and I wasn't sad about it. When I got back home, the city lights reflected off my window like quiet witnesses. My laptop pinged an email from Daniel. Audit request approved. Begins next month. Below that, he'd added one line. Hope you're ready for the fun part. I smiled. Fun wasn't the word I'd use, but there was something undeniably satisfying about watching the foundation of a lie start to shake. I closed my laptop, turned off the lights, and let the room go still. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the sound of strategy breathing. I parked across the street from the restaurant and sat for a moment, watching the valet hustle in the drizzle. The sign above the entrance glowed gold. The Haven. Evan always loved places that made average people feel poor. Inside, laughter poured out through the windows, loud and polished. I could already picture it, Evan, shaking hands with clients, Lydia smiling like she'd won the lottery, everyone pretending it wasn't weird that a man was throwing a business baby shower hybrid. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My hair was pinned up, my lipstick matched my blazer, and my expression said, I'm here for business, not sentiment. I grabbed my purse, stepped into the rain, and walked toward the door. The hostess smiled. Good evening. Reservation? Lane, I said. I'm one of the partners at Lane and Pierce Financial. That was still true. 35% true, to be exact. The hostess checked the list and brightened. Of course. Mr. Pierce will be thrilled you made it. I bet he would. She led me through a maze of polished tables to the private dining room. Music, champagne, the faint smell of roses. Evan had gone all out. He stood at the center of it, suit pressed, ego inflated. Lydia, radiant in pale pink, stood beside him with one hand resting protectively on her stomach. For a second, no one noticed me. I saw familiar faces, clients, investors, board members, people I'd once called colleagues. Now they were laughing in a room celebrating my humiliation in high heels. Then Evan saw me. His smile faltered for a split second before he recovered. Harper, he said, too smoothly. Didn't expect to see you here. I gave a small shrug. You sent the invite. I figured it was for all partners. A few people went quiet. Lydia's eyes widened, uncertain whether to greet me or hide. Evan chuckled. Of course, always good to see you. He gestured toward the buffet, the flowers, the mountain of pink and blue gifts. We're celebrating new beginnings. I nodded, lifting a glass of champagne from a passing tray. Congratulations! Then, before he could pivot away, I said lightly, Are you sure it's yours? The sentence dropped like a stone into the middle of the room. Conversations froze. Glasses stopped halfway to lips. Evan blinked. Excuse me? I smiled, polite as ever. You heard me. He stared at me, jaw tightening, searching my face for a sign of weakness. I didn't give him any. Then someone laughed awkwardly, breaking the tension, and the noise slowly returned. Evan forced a smile, his voice tightening around the edges. Harper's got a sense of humor, he said to no one in particular. Always has. Always did, I corrected, not sure what happened to it. Lydia avoided my eyes completely. Her hand trembled as she reached for her glass. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. I moved through the room like I was networking, shaking hands, making polite conversation, ignoring the whispering that followed me. A few people approached quietly, half out of curiosity, half out of pity. You look great, one of them said, the kind of empty compliment people give when they don't know what else to say. Divorce diet, I replied. That got a few nervous laughs. Evan stayed across the room, glued to his drink, pretending to listen to someone talk about stock portfolios. He kept glancing over, like he couldn't decide whether to throw me out or ignore me. Both options would make him look weak, and Evan hated looking weak. When the speeches started, I stood near the back. Evan raised his glass and began his usual monologue about growth, family, and the future. It was all brand-safe nonsense until he said, Sometimes, life gives you second chances to build the family you've always dreamed of. That one almost made me laugh. The room applauded. Cameras flashed. Lydia smiled the smile of someone trying not to cry. When the applause faded, I walked up to him. Nice speech, I said quietly. You should try telling it to your accountant. He stiffened. What's that supposed to mean? Just saying, I murmured. It's dangerous to build your future on borrowed money. And borrowed people. He leaned closer, voice low. If you're trying to embarrass me, I interrupted, keeping my tone light. Oh, Evan, you handled that yourself years ago. Then I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, smile frozen, surrounded by people pretending not to stare. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, like something had finally been rinsed off. I slipped into my car, tossed my purse on the seat, and exhaled. It wasn't satisfaction exactly, more like release. Years of humiliation boiled down to a single moment of balance. I checked my phone. Daniel had texted. Audit officially scheduled. Board notified. You were right, it'll hit him hard. I typed back. Perfect timing. The streetlight flickered red, then green. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb, the reflection of the haven shrinking in my rearview mirror. He wanted a celebration. He just didn't realize what was being celebrated. By Monday morning, the buzz from Evan's baby shower had turned into whispers. I didn't need to check social media to know that someone had filmed that moment. People always do when rich men get publicly embarrassed. It's human nature disguised as curiosity. I poured my coffee, checked my inbox, and saw Daniel's email titled, Next Steps. His message was brief. We'll start the audit this week. Don't contact him directly. Let the paperwork do the talking. Exactly how I liked it. The audit wasn't just a random review. It was a legally binding process that Evan couldn't stop without raising questions. And every question would lead back to the one thing he didn't want anyone to see. The missing funds tied to Lydia's company. At 9 a.m., Daniel called. The auditors will reach out to you for verification. You'll be copied on the communication as a shareholder. Will Evan know it came from me? I asked. He'll suspect, but he won't be able to prove it. You're within your rights. Good. I didn't need him to know. I just needed him to sweat. The first official notice went out that afternoon. I pictured his face when he opened it, reading the words, Internal Compliance Review, while trying to figure out which one of his yes men had betrayed him. That evening, I stopped by Daniel's office to sign the supporting documents. He slid a stack across the table. This gives the auditors access to the company's accounts, payroll, and third-party contracts. You're authorizing them as an owner, not as his ex-wife. That distinction matters. I signed each page carefully. Funny, I said. I used to sign documents for him all the time. He never looked twice. Daniel smirked. You're looking now. I smiled back. Oh, I'm reading everything now. We finished the paperwork, and Daniel leaned back in his chair. You know, Harper, this is one of the cleanest revenge stories I've ever seen. No chaos, no social media rants, no broken windows. I shrugged. I'm not trying to ruin him. I'm just returning everything he left on my side of the table. Oh, Kate. Daniel raised his coffee cup in a small salute. To balance. I clinked my water bottle against it. To balance. Later that night, I sat by my apartment window, watching traffic slide past below. The city hummed quietly indifferent, efficient. Somewhere out there, Evan was probably pouring himself a drink, telling Lydia that I was acting out. He always simplified everything I did that scared him. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered without thinking. Harper. His voice. Evan. He paused, like he hadn't expected me to sound calm. You made quite an appearance the other night. I was invited, I said. You embarrassed me in front of clients. I almost laughed. I think you managed that yourself. Whatever this audit thing is, drop it. It's unnecessary. Then it shouldn't bother you, I said. It's bad timing, he pressed. We're restructuring. I can make sure you're compensated fairly when this divorce is finalized. Compensated, I repeated. That's a nice word for silence. Don't twist it, Harper. I'm offering peace. You don't get to define peace anymore. He exhaled hard through the phone. You always had to win, didn't you? I just stopped losing. I hung up before he could answer. The next morning, Daniel sent me the preliminary audit schedule. It was perfect, subtle, procedural, impossible for Evan to stop without looking guilty. Within weeks, the auditors would start digging into every transaction he'd tried to hide. That afternoon, I visited the corporate office for the first time since I'd left. My access card still worked. The receptionist looked surprised to see me, but didn't stop me. I walked down the hall, same beige walls, same framed motivational posters Evan had picked out years ago. Integrity, leadership, trust. The irony nearly made me laugh. I dropped the signed audit documents off at the board's legal department. One of the senior partners, an older man named Harris, smiled politely. Glad to see you back, Miss Lane. We've missed your attention to detail. I'm sure you have, I said. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of Evan in the corner office. He was on the phone, pacing, his tie loosened. His eyes flicked up and met mine for just a second. He froze mid-sentence. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just walked out. By the time I reached the elevator, my heart was steady. The old version of me would have crumbled at that look. The new one recognized it for what it was, fear wrapped in arrogance. Back home, I poured another glass of wine and opened my laptop. Daniel had sent another message. Insurance verification request submitted. Once they confirm Lydia's dependent status, we'll have a clear trail. It wasn't just financial anymore. Evan had added Lydia to his corporate health plan. That meant DNA verification would automatically be required for dependent eligibility. It was a simple procedural formality, one that would expose everything without me lifting a finger. I sat there for a long time, watching the city lights blink through my window. I didn't feel triumphant or vindictive. I just felt steady. People think revenge is about rage, but they're wrong. Real revenge is paperwork filed correctly and patience used wisely. And as I saved Daniel's message, I couldn't help but smile at the simplicity of it all. The truth wasn't something I had to shout. It was something I only needed to sign. The email from Daniel came early in the morning, time-stamped 6:43 a.m. The subject line was only 2 words. It happened. I clicked it open. Inside was a copy of a routine notice from the company's insurance provider, an official verification request for a dependent claim. Lydia Moore's name was listed under Evan's policy, along with a note requesting additional documentation, including a DNA confirmation form. It was exactly what Daniel had predicted. The domino had fallen, quietly and legally. I stared at the screen, sipping my coffee. It didn't feel like victory, not yet. It felt like the pause before thunder. By noon, the first call came. Evan. I didn't answer. He called again, and again, then a text. Call me. Now. End of days. I put my phone face down and went back to work. That evening, I walked through the grocery store, basket in hand, letting the fluorescent lights and hum of quiet conversations drown out everything else. I didn't need to think about Evan or Lydia or whatever excuses he was rehearsing. The truth was already moving slow, unstoppable, documented. By the time I got home, the calls had stopped. I poured myself a glass of wine, kicked off my heels, and let the silence fill the apartment. At 9:17, a message popped up. Unknown number. You think this is funny? You're going to destroy everything. I typed back. Everything was already destroyed. Then I turned off my phone. The next morning, Daniel called, his tone casual, but there was a flicker of satisfaction underneath. He got the letter. I figured. Word is, he stormed into HR and started demanding answers. They told him the form is automatic. No one singled him out. I smiled. He hates being treated like everyone else. Daniel chuckled. He'll try to control it, of course. Probably thinks he can fix it before the results come back. Good luck to him, I said. 2 days later, I got a call from a number I recognized but hadn't saved. Lydia. Her voice was small, thin around the edges. Harper. I don't know what's happening. Evan's losing it. He said someone's trying to sabotage him. I'm not someone, I said. I'm the person he lied to. She went quiet for a moment. He told me you were cruel, that you couldn't handle losing. I handled it fine, I said. He's the one who couldn't handle the truth. I didn't know, she said softly. I swear he told me. I cut her off. Lydia, stop apologizing. You're not the first woman he's used to cover a lie. Just make sure you're not the last. She exhaled shakily, then hung up. Later that week, Daniel emailed again. DNA results processed, not a match. Insurance forwarded results to HR and compliance. I stared at the line for a long time. Just text on a screen, but enough to topple everything Evan had built. By noon, the news was everywhere inside the company. It wasn't public yet, but office gossip travels faster than official memos. Pierce's lover's baby isn't his. Audit coming up. Board's furious. I didn't need to hear it from anyone. I could feel it humming through the city. That night, Evan showed up at my apartment. I heard the knock and knew instantly it was him. No one else knocked with that kind of entitlement. When I opened the door, he looked different, disheveled, angry, eyes red like he hadn't slept. You did this, he said. Did what? He stepped inside without asking, pacing the floor. You went to HR. You told them about Lydia. I crossed my arms. HR doesn't need me to tell them when a grown man lies on his insurance forms. His jaw tightened. You think this will make you look good? You'll ruin both of us. Correction, I said calmly. You ruined yourself. I'm just watching. You're sick, he spat. This obsession with destroying me. I raised my hand. Evan, don't confuse truth with obsession. I didn't make you cheat. I didn't make you lie about your health. I didn't make you register a fake subsidiary under your girlfriend's name. He froze. What are you talking about? More holdings, I said simply. For a moment, he didn't breathe. Then his voice dropped, almost a whisper. You have no idea what you've started. Actually, I said, I know exactly what I've started. He took a step closer, but his anger deflated halfway. Harper, we can fix this. You can walk away with your share and be done. No more fighting. I'll even make sure you get a settlement above market value. I almost laughed. You think I care about your money? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The silence between us stretched thin. You wanted control, I said finally. You wanted to be the man who saved face while making me the problem. But that's over. You don't get to own the narrative anymore. He looked at me for a long moment, eyes darting across my face like he was searching for the old version of me, the one who forgave him, who took the blame. But she wasn't there. When he finally spoke, his voice was smaller. You'll regret this. No, I said quietly. You will. I free? He left without slamming the door. I stood in the doorway, watching the hallway lights flicker on his way down the stairs. When I finally sat down, I didn't feel triumphant or satisfied. I just felt done with the pretending, the silence, the weight of someone else's lies. The truth wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It just sat there, steady and undeniable, waiting for him to realize it had already won. The day the auditors walked into Lane and Pierce Financial, the mood in the building changed. I could feel it even from the elevator lobby, the shift in tone, the stiff politeness, the way conversations stopped mid-sentence when a clipboard appeared. Corporate silence has a sound. It's the same as fear, but with better lighting. I had every reason to be there. My shareholder meeting had been scheduled weeks ago, and the audit was routine. At least that's what the board told themselves. No one says fraud investigation out loud in a company that handles other people's money. I signed in at reception, nodded to a few familiar faces, and walked down the hall toward the conference room. The glass doors were open, and through them, I could see Evan. He stood with his hands in his pockets, pretending calm, his jaw set so tightly I could see it from across the room. The lead auditor, a woman named Marcy, sat opposite him, her tone firm but professional. We just need to verify these transactions. Shouldn't take long if everything's clean. That if was doing a lot of work. Evan looked up and spotted me. The flicker of irritation on his face was almost satisfying. Harper, he said, forcing a smile. Didn't expect to see you here. I own a third of this company, I said. I expect to see everything. Marcy smiled politely and motioned to a chair. Miss Lane, thank you for joining us. You initiated the review, correct? Technically, yes, I said, but I prefer to think of it as safeguarding investments. Evan exhaled through his nose, the kind of breath people take before they start losing control. The meeting stretched on for hours. The auditors moved through accounts, asking pointed questions about vendor contracts, expense reports, and third-party transfers. Every time they said the words, more holdings, Evan's posture stiffened. At one point, Marcy looked at a document and frowned. This account consulting retainer shows recurring payments to More Holdings for marketing services. Do you have corresponding invoices? Evan's voice stayed calm, but his hands tightened around his pen. They're in the process of being reconciled. Daniel, who sat beside me as my legal representative, leaned forward. How long does reconciliation usually take? Evan shot him a glare. This isn't your concern. Daniel smiled. As counsel for a 35% shareholder, it actually is. For the first time, Evan didn't have an answer ready. By noon, it was clear that the paper trail was thin and the explanations thinner. Marcy requested digital access to all subsidiary ledgers, including More Holdings. When she asked who owned it, Evan said, "It's an independent consultant." Marcy raised an eyebrow. Registered to Lydia Moore. Same last name as your executive assistant? Silence. Evan cleared his throat. Yes, but that's purely coincidental. I couldn't help it, I laughed. Out loud. The sound bounced around the conference room, and for a second, even Marcy cracked a smile. Evan turned toward me, his voice low. You think this is funny? No, I said. I think it's math. Daniel hid his grin behind his notes. By the end of the session, the auditors had enough inconsistencies to warrant a deeper review. Marcy handed Evan a formal notice. We'll be in touch for follow-ups. Please make sure all requested records are provided by next week. He took the paper without looking at her, eyes locked on me instead. There it was again, that silent anger that used to make me apologize before I even knew what I'd done wrong. This time, it didn't work. I stood, gathering my files. If you need anything from my side, let me know, I said to Marcy. Of course, she replied. Thank you for your cooperation. I turned to Evan. Good luck reconciling. When I stepped into the hallway, the tension broke like a rubber band. Employees moved around me, pretending not to stare, but I caught the looks, half curiosity, half admiration. No one ever expected the quiet one to start the fire. Downstairs, Daniel joined me as we walked to the parking lot. He's finished, he said. Not yet, I replied, but the truth is, He nodded. You handled that better than I would have. I've had practice, I said. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the city lights through the window. The emails started rolling in statements from the auditors, legal copies, financial disclosures. Every line was another nail in the coffin Evan had built himself. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still, like a storm that had passed and left the air sharp and clear. At 10 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Evan. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. He didn't waste time. You just made a huge mistake, he said. His voice was controlled but trembling underneath. Filing an audit? I said. Seems pretty standard. You think the board's going to back you over me? I don't need them to, I said. I've got the numbers. He went quiet, then muttered, You'll regret this. I doubt it. Harper, this isn't just about the company, he said suddenly, a note of desperation breaking through. You're burning everything down. End quote. Evan, I said evenly, you set the fire. I just stopped pretending it wasn't smoke. He didn't respond. I waited, but the line went dead. I sat back, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. Somewhere across town, he was probably pacing his apartment, realizing he was finally out of versions of the truth to tell. When I closed my laptop, the night outside looked different, cleaner somehow, less heavy. Maybe justice doesn't come crashing in all at once. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the form of an audit report with his name on every page. 3 months later, Evan's name was on every finance blog that used to quote him. Lane and Pierce, CEO under internal investigation. The headlines were careful, no one dared say fraud yet, but everyone knew what it meant. I didn't have to search for the news. People sent it to me. Coworkers, old friends, even clients who once avoided eye contact at company events suddenly wanted to check if I'd seen it. I always replied the same way. Yes, I've seen it. Hope you're well. Lydia, on the other hand, vanished. Deleted social media. Left the company. The last time anyone saw her, she was packing up her desk, sunglasses on indoors. Word was, she'd gone back to her hometown to figure things out. I didn't blame her. The baby, the scandal, the lies, Evan had left her with a mess that didn't belong to her. I wasn't interested in revenge against her. She'd already paid the price of trusting him. The board suspended Evan from his role indefinitely, pending the outcome of the audit. That's corporate language for, don't come back. They let him keep his title on paper to avoid market panic, but everyone knew the truth. He was done. One afternoon, I met Daniel at a quiet cafe near the courthouse. He had that look of calm satisfaction lawyers get when a plan finally does what it's supposed to. They found enough to pursue civil charges, he said. Creative bookkeeping, misuse of client funds, falsified vendor contracts. It's a buffet of bad decisions. I stirred my coffee. He'll spin it somehow. Maybe, Daniel said. But the numbers don't care about spin. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. The sound of plates clinking and soft jazz filled the air. For once, I didn't feel like the person sitting across from a lawyer. I felt like someone who'd survived something ugly and come out clean. Daniel finally said, You know, you could go public with this. Tell your story. People would listen. I shook my head. I'm not selling a story. I'm reclaiming a life. He smiled faintly. Fair enough. When I got home, there was a message waiting on my voicemail. Ellen, my former mother-in-law. Her tone was sharp, half grief, half accusation. Harper, I hope you're proud. You've ruined him. He's lost everything. You had your piece, and you took ours too. I replayed it once, then deleted it. She didn't understand that peace isn't something you steal. You earn it by surviving people who tried to convince you that you never deserved it. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, looking out over the city lights. Denver was quiet, rain streaking down the glass. Somewhere out there, Evan was probably sitting in some rented apartment with no boardroom left to hide in. The man who used to control every conversation now had no one answering his calls. I didn't feel sorry for him, but I didn't feel joyful either. Just finished. The next morning, I met Ellen in person. She'd shown up outside my office unannounced, wearing her usual pearls and perfectly ironed judgment. Harper, she said, crossing her arms, we need to talk. I doubt that, I said. Her eyes were wet, but her voice stayed sharp. He's destroyed. Lydia's gone, the company's taking everything, and he can't even get a job interview. Is that what you wanted? I looked at her. You mean, is that what happens when someone lies, cheats, and steals? Yes, that's exactly what happens. She shook her head. You always were cold. I smiled a little. You mistook boundaries for coldness. Easy mistake. Tears welled in her eyes, but not for me, for the son she'd raised to believe he could never lose. He's broken, she whispered. No, I said softly. He's just finally honest. She turned to leave but stopped halfway. Are you happy now? I thought about it for a second. No, just at peace. When she walked away, her heels echoed down the hall like punctuation marks. I didn't feel lighter. Peace doesn't always come with joy. It comes with space. Space where noise used to be. Later that week, Daniel sent me a final summary of the audit. Evan had officially been removed from his position. The board voted to dissolve the partnership, rebranding the company without his name. Lane Financial Advisory. It looks strange without the ampersand, but somehow right. Daniel added a note. Congratulations, Harper. Quiet justice is still justice. I closed the laptop and leaned back. The hum of the city felt softer now. Around sunset, I went for a walk by the river. The air smelled of wet pavement and pine. I passed a group of people laughing by the water, their joy simple, uncalculated. For years I thought happiness was something that came from fixing someone else. Now I knew better, it comes from not needing to anymore. When I got back home, my phone buzzed one last time. Evan again. This time, just a single line. You win. I stared at the message, then deleted it without replying. Winning wasn't the point. It never was. The point was walking away and realizing I didn't need the game at all. The courtroom smelled like coffee and cold air. I'd been there before, years ago, back when I handled depositions for clients, back when I still believed justice was something that wore a suit. Today, I was the case file. Evan sat 2 tables away, flanked by his lawyer, a man with a haircut too sharp for someone defending the indefensible. He looked smaller now. Maybe it was the lighting, or maybe it was the absence of arrogance. The kind of humility that only comes when life finally stops pretending to protect you. I took my seat next to Daniel. Ready? He asked quietly. Ready enough. The judge walked in, the clerk called the case, and just like that, 10 years of marriage were reduced to a docket number. Evan's attorney started first, his tone perfectly rehearsed. Your Honor, this divorce has been unnecessarily complicated by my client's wife, who continues to involve corporate matters irrelevant to this proceeding. My client wishes only to move forward. I almost laughed. Evan had used that phrase 100 times. Move forward translation. Forget what I did so I don't have to apologize. Daniel stood. Your Honor, we'll address what's relevant. And the truth, unfortunately for Mr. Pierce, is very relevant. The judge nodded for him to continue. Daniel walked toward the bench, holding a stack of documents. We have evidence of financial misconduct, fraudulent transfers, and deliberate concealment of assets during the marriage. These actions not only affect the divorce settlement but directly reflect on Mr. Pierce's credibility. Evan shifted in his seat. His lawyer objected, but the judge overruled him. Daniel continued, handing the exhibits to the clerk. Additionally, we have verified medical records and DNA results that contradict Mr. Pierce's prior claims against my client. The room went quiet. Evan's lawyer straightened. Your Honor, that information is personal and irrelevant to— It's entirely relevant, Daniel said smoothly. For years, Mr. Pierce publicly humiliated Miss Lane, accusing her of being infertile. Those statements influenced both their personal and professional reputations. The records show, in fact, that Mr. Pierce is medically incapable of conceiving. You could hear a pin drop. Evan's jaw locked. His lawyer leaned in to whisper something, but Evan waved him off. He looked directly at me, eyes sharp with the same mix of rage and disbelief I'd seen that night at the dinner table. The night everything started unraveling. Daniel went on. Miss Lane has remained silent through all of this. No public statements, no retaliation. She's here today for one reason, to end this marriage with the truth intact. The judge turned to me. Miss Lane, would you like to add anything before we proceed? I stood, smoothed my jacket, and walked to the front. My voice was steady, almost too calm. For years, I believed my husband when he told me I was broken, I said. I carried that lie into every doctor's appointment, every dinner, every conversation about the future. I thought if I worked harder, forgave more, stayed quieter, I could fix it. I paused, letting the silence breathe. But the truth is, I was never the problem. I just lived with someone who was terrified of being exposed. Evan looked down at the table, his hands clenched. He called me barren, I continued. He called me the reason his life wasn't what he wanted. And all that time, he was hiding behind paperwork and pretending it made him powerful. I looked at the judge. I don't want his money. I don't want his name. I just want the truth to stand where his lies used to live. The judge nodded once. Thank you, Miss Lane. When I returned to my seat, Daniel leaned over and whispered, That's the part people remember. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The rest of the hearing moved quickly. The evidence spoke louder than any closing argument could. The audit reports, the medical documents, the transfer receipts, all of it told the same story. Evan Pierce had built his empire on deceit and used me as its foundation. By afternoon, the judge issued her ruling. The marriage was dissolved. Assets were divided fairly. No spousal support, no ongoing claims. Just clean separation. Evan's lawyer muttered something to him, but Evan didn't answer. He sat there, staring straight ahead, eyes unfocused. I wondered if he finally realized what it felt like to lose something you couldn't replace. Not the marriage, not the money, but the illusion of control. When the gavel struck, it sounded final, but not dramatic. Just done. As people filed out, I gathered my things. Evan stood abruptly. Harper, he said. His voice cracked, softer than I'd ever heard it. Was it worth it? I turned to him. Yes. End of the PD. He swallowed hard, then said quietly, You ruined me. I shook my head. You did that yourself. I just stopped cleaning up after you. He didn't reply. He just sat down again, as if the weight of his own choices had finally caught up. Outside, the air felt lighter. I stood on the courthouse steps, the late afternoon sun hitting my face. Daniel joined me, holding out the final decree. It's official, he said. I took it, folded it carefully, and slipped it into my bag. It was official years ago, I said. Today just made it legal. He smiled. You handled this with grace. Grace isn't the same as forgiveness, I said. But it's close enough for now. We parted ways on the sidewalk. I walked toward my car, heels clicking against the concrete, each step feeling more like my own. Inside, I started the engine and looked at my reflection in the mirror. No wedding ring, no shadow of his voice in my head, just me. The light turned green, and I drove away, not toward revenge or closure, just toward whatever came next. The paperwork from the court sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I opened it. Not because I couldn't face it, but because I wanted to give it the weight it deserved. 10 years of marriage, one stamped signature, and a silence that finally belonged to me. When I did open it, I didn't cry. I didn't feel victorious either. It was something different, like stepping outside after a storm and realizing the ground had stopped shaking. The next morning, I drove to City Hall and filed the paperwork for the Second Bloom Foundation. The name came to me weeks ago, long before I admitted to Daniel what I was planning. A nonprofit offering financial and emotional support for women going through infertility treatments, separation, or rebuilding after emotional abuse. It wasn't about Evan. It was about every woman who'd been told she wasn't enough because someone else couldn't handle their own failure. Setting up the foundation felt like muscle memory budgeting, structure, outreach. I'd done this kind of work my whole career, but now it mattered. It wasn't another client's business plan. It was mine. The first grant came from a client I'd represented years ago, a woman who'd gone through a messy divorce of her own. She sent a handwritten note with the check. You taught me how to stand up without shouting. Use this to help someone else do the same. It made me smile. Quiet power had a way of echoing. Daniel helped with the legal side, as always. He stopped by the new office one afternoon, a small space above a florist shop downtown. The smell of roses drifted through the vents, soft and grounding. He leaned on the doorframe, looking around. So this is what rebirth looks like. End of 20. Smells better than the last office I worked in, I said. He laughed. You've built something solid here, Harper. I hope you know that. I nodded. For a long time, I thought my life was about proving something to Evan. Now I just want it to mean something to me. Daniel's smile softened. That's the difference between surviving and living. He left after helping me sort the last stack of donation forms. When the door closed behind him, I sat at my desk, surrounded by quiet and sunlight, and felt something I hadn't felt in years' ease. The foundation grew faster than I expected. Within weeks, volunteers joined therapists, lawyers, accountants, women who'd seen too much of life's unfairness and still chose to help. One evening, I hosted a small gathering for them, a thank you dinner. There were no speeches, no forced smiles, just good food and real laughter. When one of the women asked why I started the foundation, I told her the truth. I wanted to turn the worst thing that happened to me into something useful. She raised her glass. Then you did it. After everyone left, I stayed behind to clean up. The candles burned low, and the city lights flickered through the windows. On the table, someone had left a flower, a white lily. I took it home and placed it in a glass of water beside my bed. The next morning, I drove out to the lake. It was early, the kind of quiet morning where the air still holds its breath. I stood by the edge of the dock, the divorce papers folded neatly in my hand. I pulled off my wedding ring, the one I hadn't worn in months but never bothered to throw away, and turned it between my fingers. It wasn't sadness that filled me, it was gratitude. Gratitude for the lesson, for the escape, for the woman who finally stopped trying to be small enough to fit someone else's comfort. I dropped the ring into the lake. It made the smallest ripple, then disappeared. The water stilled almost instantly, as if nothing had happened. But I knew something had. That afternoon, I received an invitation to speak at a women's conference, Finance, Freedom, and Healing. The organizer had read about the foundation in a local paper. When I walked onto that stage a few weeks later, I wasn't nervous. I wasn't performing. I just told the truth. I used to think success meant control, I said to the room. Then I learned it's actually peace. Peace comes when you stop negotiating with people who benefit from your silence. Applause broke out, quiet at first, then stronger. A few women wiped their eyes. I smiled not for the attention, but because I saw in their faces the same realization that once saved me, that truth doesn't destroy you, it sets you free, in the most ordinary, human way. After the talk, Daniel met me backstage. You know, he said, you might have just inspired half this room to file for divorce. I laughed. Then at least they'll have good accountants. He grinned. You really are done with him, huh? Completely, I said. I don't even hate him anymore. That part feels heavier than he deserves. Daniel nodded, then handed me an envelope. From the board of Lane Financial, they want to buy out your remaining shares. It's a generous offer. I opened it, glanced at the number, and folded it back. Tell them to donate it to the foundation. Consider it poetic symmetry. He smiled. I'll make it happen. Later that evening, I sat by the window of my apartment. The city was quiet again, rain tapping softly against the glass. On the desk beside me was a list of the foundation's upcoming projects, scholarships, therapy sponsorships, career programs. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better than that. It was real, steady, earned. Somewhere deep inside, a piece of me bloomed again, not because I got revenge, but because I finally stopped needing it. The first snow of the season came early that year. The air in Denver was sharp and clean, and the sky carried that quiet grayness that made sound travel softer. I'd spent the morning at the foundation, meeting a new group of women who'd just joined one of our programs. Listening to their stories reminded me why I'd built it in the first place. Pain looks different on everyone, but silence always sounds the same. By late afternoon, I drove home through a blur of falling snow. My little house on the edge of town waited with its porch light glowing through the haze, a steady warmth against the white. I parked, grabbed the grocery bag from the passenger seat, and felt a small pair of hands tug my coat sleeve. Can I carry the milk? I smiled down at the tiny voice. Sure, but both hands, okay? It's heavy for you. The girl, dark curls, oversized mittens, and eyes too big for her face, nodded solemnly, like I'd just assigned her a mission. Her name was Nora. I'd met her at a children's outreach event a year ago, and after months of paperwork, she was home for good. My daughter, finally. Inside, the heater hummed and the smell of hot cocoa filled the kitchen. Nora set the milk on the counter and giggled when it nearly toppled over. I ruffled her hair. "Good job, champ. You're stronger than you look." "Oh, bear." She grinned and went back to coloring on the kitchen table while I unpacked groceries. The quiet between us was the kind that doesn't ache anymore. It just breathes. I was stirring the pot when the doorbell rang. One long buzz, not the polite kind. Nora looked up. "Mom?" "It's okay," I said, wiping my hands. "Probably a delivery." But when I opened the door, it wasn't a delivery. Evan stood there, his coat dusted with snow, eyes hollow and tired. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. The man who once radiated control now looked like someone who'd been chasing it and lost the map. "Harper," he said quietly, "can we talk?" For a second, I didn't move. The wind blew around us, carrying snow into the doorway. Behind me, Nora was humming softly, oblivious. I stepped outside and pulled the door halfway shut behind me. "You shouldn't be here." He nodded. "I know, but I had to see you." "What for?" He exhaled, breath fogging in the cold. "Everything's gone. The company, the condo, Lydia. She left. I've been trying to figure out what happened, how I let it all spiral." I waited. He looked up, his eyes searching mine like they used to when he wanted forgiveness before even saying sorry. "I thought I'd built something solid," he said. "Turns out it was all paper, and now I just keep thinking about the only person who ever actually cared enough to stay through the ugly parts." I crossed my arms. "You mean the person you called broken?" He winced. "I didn't mean it." "Yes, you did," I said evenly. "And that's the difference. I believed you back then. I don't anymore." He stared at me, jaw trembling. "You look different. Happier." "I am," I said simply. His eyes flicked past me to the small figure sitting at the kitchen table, drawing with a blue crayon. "You have a kid?" His voice cracked on the word, disbelief wrapped in regret. I turned slightly, just enough so he could see, without stepping inside. Nora looked up, waved, then went back to her picture. "She's adopted," I said. He blinked, as if the world had tilted. You have a family." I met his gaze. "No, I have peace." He swallowed hard, eyes glassy. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I said. "For once, that's not my job to fix." For a moment, we just stood there. The snow thickened, landing in his hair, melting down his collar. He looked smaller somehow, human in a way he'd never allowed himself to be when everything was going his way. Finally, he whispered, "You really don't hate me, do you?" I shook my head. "No, Evan. I don't waste space on hate." He gave a weak laugh, the kind that wasn't really laughter. "I keep waiting for karma to hit me harder." "It already did," I said quietly. He looked down, nodding slowly. Then his eyes lifted to mine, soft, almost pleading. "You had the truth all along." "And so there." I opened the door halfway, feeling the warmth spill out into the cold. "No," I said. "I became it." He froze, the snow still falling around him, and for once, he didn't have a comeback. Nora's laughter echoed from inside light, real, unbothered. It was the kind of sound that didn't belong to the world we'd built together, the one that had collapsed under his lies. It belonged here, in this new life he couldn't touch. I nodded once, then stepped back into the doorway. "Take care of yourself, Evan." He opened his mouth to speak, but I'd already closed the door. The latch clicked softly. Inside, Nora held up her drawing. "Look, Mom. It's us, me and you and the cabin at the lake." I smiled and crouched beside her. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." Outside, the snow kept falling. The house felt warm, alive, filled with small sounds of paper rustling and cocoa cups clinking. I glanced at the window, saw the faint shadow of Evan's figure still standing in the snow, then fading slowly into the white. I didn't feel anger or satisfaction, just peace, the kind that comes when the truth finally sits still. Nora tugged my sleeve again. Can we bake cookies now? Yeah, I said, smiling. Let's make the kitchen smell like home. And we did. If you've ever lived through a betrayal that tried to define you, I hope this story reminds you that you still get to write the ending. Leave a comment if this hit close to home. I read every single one. And if you want more real cheating stories, revenge stories, and husband betrayal stories where truth wins in the end, hit subscribe. It helps the channel grow, but more than that, it keeps these